Hi everyone, welcome back to MSA 2020 Phase 1. Today, Karam and I will be taking you guys through DevOps 101. We'll be looking specifically at Azure DevOps, how to configure a build and release pipeline for the purpose of continuous delivery. What is DevOps? DevOps by definition is a set of practices combining software development and IT operation. The purpose of DevOps is to promote collaboration and allow multidisciplinary teams to merge their efforts into a streamlined development process. DevOps focuses on automation to drive faster deployment and in turn increases frequency and quality of the deployed application. Here, we'll be using Azure DevOps to implement a CI/CD pipelines or continuous integration and continuous deployment, where we integrate code changes and test as early and often as possible. This allows us to catch any issue before they slip into production. Continuous deployment allows us to automatically release code into test environment or even production environment given all that automated tests have passed. Continuous deployment helps us keep our application deployable at any given point. Without further ado, I'd like to pass it on to you, Karam.
Thank you for that, Paul. In my section, I'm going to go over how to build a build pipeline and a release pipeline. Before we get started on that, we have to do some setup work. So we're going to create a GitHub repo. We're also going to create an Azure web app. This is where we're going to deploy our little test project to using the release pipeline. And we're also going to make a React-based project. So we're just going to initialize a React project, and that's going to be our placeholder in our repo. And that's actually what we're going to be deploying as well. So to get started, we'll make a new repository. So I'll just give this a name. I'm going to set the repo to private, so you can do this as well. And then I'm going to initialize the repo with a README, and then I'm going to create the repo. Now I'm going to copy the URL for the repo and pull up a shell. So here in my PowerShell terminal, I'm going to navigate to where I want to clone the repo to. And now I'm just going to use git clone and the URL that I just copied to clone the repo. And this will just take a second. Now we're going to navigate into the repo that we just cloned. And I'm going to run the create React app. So this is going to make for me a standard base React app, and I'm using TypeScript here. So let's navigate into the project. I'm just going to test it out by using npm start, and this is going to start up the development server, and I'm going to navigate to localhost here to port 3000, and that should show me the React app, and as you can see, we have it working here. So now I'm going to use Control-C just to terminate the job. So here I'm adding all of the files I just created when I ran the create React app command. I'm staging all those, and I'm going to commit them to the Git repository, and then I'm going to push it up to master. So that's pushing it up to the GitHub repository, the remote GitHub repository that we created. Now I'm just going to exit the shell. Okay, now we're going to create the web app. So we're going to go up to create a resource in our Azure portal. So for those of you that don't know where this is, it's portal.azure.com, and that's where I am at the moment. So I'm just going to pick a resource group. I'm just going to create a new one. I think I'll call it win group. And I'm going to give the web app a name. So I'm going to go for MSA DevOps 2020-06. And the runtime stack that we're going to be using will be Node 12 LTS, so the long-term service version. And make sure to set the operating system to Windows as well. And then we're going to begin the creation process. And if we're happy with that, we're going to click Create. And it's going to take a couple of minutes to deploy the resource. As we can see here, the deployment is underway. This usually takes a couple of minutes, so we're just going to skip it. So here in the Azure DevOps environment, I'm going to create a new organization. And I'm just going to click through here. I'm going to name it MSA DevOps 2020-06. And this will just take a moment as well. So here we have to create a project to get started. So I'm going to name it just MSA DevOps and then create project. And I'm going to go down to pipelines here and then create a pipeline. And I'm going to tell Azure DevOps that my code is in my GitHub. And then I'm going to select my GitHub repository. So we're going to start off with a starter pipeline, just so we can sort of get used to everything that's happening in the pipeline. And we're going to be building it from scratch essentially, so we'll be starting with this one. I'm going to go up there and click save and run, and save and run. And so this is going to commit it directly to the master branch. And just a small side note as well, this means that we will have to do a git pull before we commit to our repository, or push any commits up to our repository locally. And so here we can see the job running. So here I'm just going to click through and have a look at some of these. So here we can see it's all successful. But if there are any issues, this is where you look to debug, because it will show you what went wrong, essentially. So here I'm just going to edit the pipeline. So here, this is the first section here. We are telling the pipeline what build agent to use. So here I'm specifying Ubuntu latest, and we're going to keep that. We're happy with that, so we're going to keep that. The Azure Pipelines allows you to use either Mac OS or Windows, or of course Ubuntu. So you've got your choice of those three operating systems. So here I'm just specifying the steps, and the task here that I'm specifying is the task that will install Node onto the machine. So here we're specifying that the node of the version of Node that we want is 10 point something. The something is denoted with the X, and we're going to set the display name to install Node, just so that we know what's happening when it runs. Here we're going to start the script, and notice the bar character that I used after the script, so that allows me to do a multi-line command. And here I'm using a variable. I haven't defined the variable yet. That should have been defined. I kept this part in just so we can go through debugging steps later. But we will see that later there will be an error thrown. And essentially we're going to look at the output of the pipeline, and we're going to determine there's something missing. And then at that point I'm going to add the variables. So variables are essentially just specified using the $, and then the brackets, and in that you put the variable name. That's how you reference variables. Here I'm going to use the assistant on the side to add a task. And so I'm looking here for the archive, so the archive task. And we have to change the root folder or the file that we want to archive. And so here I'm specifying the build directory variable, which I have not specified, but I will specify later. And note also, we don't want to prepend the root folder name to the archive path, so we have to uncheck that box. And then when we're good to go, we add the task. And here I just make sure that the indenting is correct. So now in the assistant, I'm going to look for the publish artifacts task. So there are 2 published tasks. One is deprecated, and so you shouldn't use that one. Use the one that says publish build artifacts. And so we don't have to make any changes here because I was looking for the artifact in the standard location, and we didn't change the standard location in the last task, so here we don't have to change anything. And what this will do is publish the artifact, which in this case is the a zip of the build file, build folder that we produce, and it'll allow our release pipeline to access it. Now that I'm happy with the script, the build script, I'm going to go up here and save. And this will commit the changes to the master branch. So all changes are committed to the master branch in the form of an Azure pipelines.yaml file. Yeah, so if you want to make any changes to the pipeline, you don't have to use the online interface. You can make changes to the Azure pipelines.yaml file directly on your local machine, and then just push the commits up to the remote repository in your GitHub account, and that will cause the pipeline to run as well. So every time, so with the standard configuration, the pipeline will run every time you commit to the master branch currently. Here we see that the job is queued, and so this will take a moment. Okay, so here the job is run to completion, or to the point where it failed. So I'm going to investigate that further by clicking on that. And so here we can see that the archive files task failed, and it's saying no such file or directory. And we can also see here on line 13 that that this task is looking for package.json in the root directory of our folder, which is not where it should be looking. And that's because the variable that we haven't specified, we're using cd and then the variable, and we haven't specified it, so we're going to have to change that. So here we're going to go back and edit the pipeline. So here we're going to add the variables in. So here I'm specifying a variable called root_dir, short for directory, so root directory, so root_dir, and I'm giving it the value my app, and then for build_dir, the variable I'm specifying there. As you can see, I'm using the root_dir variable in the construction of the build_dir variable. And so the full path of the build_dir will be my app/build, which will be the folder where our build file will be. And so let me save that, and that will automatically run. And so here we go back to, let's watch the job run. So currently it's running. So if we click on it, we see the first 2 tasks have successfully completed. And this is going to take a while, so I'm just going to skip ahead. And so we can see that everything worked out well. It all finished successfully. And so our changes were good. So if you want the full Azure pipelines.yaml file, it will be up in the GitHub README, and so you can look there. But I thought it'd be useful for everyone just to watch how we go through the debugging process there. So you will probably encounter some issues when you're making changes to your DevOps pipeline, and just remember, you can go in there and look at the output of the tasks to determine what went wrong if something does go wrong. So now that the build pipeline is successfully finished, we have a publish artifact, which we now need to grab with the release pipeline. So now we're going to click on releases on the left-hand side menu, and we're going to create a new pipeline. Here I'm going to choose the template Azure App Service Deployment and just apply that. And then we're going to go over to artifacts, and this is where we choose the artifact that the release pipeline will grab. So we're going to keep the source type as build, and we're going to tell it where to look for it, and we'll keep everything else the same. So here we're going to edit the stage 1 task. So we're going to enter some credentials. Since we used a template, we already have a task in this stage, so the deploy Azure App Service. And here we have to enter our credentials. Make sure that the credential that you're using matches up with the credential that you use to create your web app resource. So I'm just going to go through the process here of entering my credentials. Make sure that the app type is web app on Windows, since we deployed a Windows app service. And now from the drop down we can select the name. If the name of your service doesn't pop up there, it's likely because you don't have the right app type, or you didn't choose the right description. So now once we've entered all those details, we're good. By clicking on this little thunderbolt on the artifacts, we can set the continuous deployment trigger. So I'm going to enable that. This will allow the release pipeline to run after the build pipeline has been triggered. So this will allow for every time you do push a commit to the master branch, the build pipeline will build it, publish the artifact, and the release pipeline, once we've enabled continuous deployment, will then grab the artifact straight away and deploy it to the web app. For some, in some cases, you may choose a manual deployment. Here I'm adding a filter, so I only want the build to occur for changes to the master branch. And I'm going to change the name of my build pipeline just to MSA DevOps 2020. And then I'm going to save it. So the folder, that's fine. So we're just going to press OK. And then we're going to create the release. So in this case, it will be manual, since there's no build. Because the pipeline is triggered by a build finishing. We currently don't have a build finishing, so we're just going to trigger it manually. So now we can look at how the release process is happening. So you can see here as it goes through the process of the release. Once that stage 1 has finished, the deployment will be complete, and we'll be able to go to the URL of the web app that we created earlier, and we should be able to see the base React project. So here I'm just going to navigate to the URL. For some reason the go to resource button isn't working, so I'm just going to go to the win group, and inside the win group there is the web app service, or the web app. And then here's the URL, and if I click on the URL, you can see here that we have the base project successfully deployed. Now at this point, we want to test what will happen if we push a commit to the master branch on our remote repository in GitHub. What we expect to happen is that the commit causes the build pipeline to be triggered, and then once the build pipeline is completed, it will publish an artifact, which the release pipeline will pick up and push up to our web app. So we're going to test this out by making a couple of changes to our web app. So just navigate into the my web app source directory, and in here we have a app.tsx file, and here we'll make changes to that. So I'm just going to use my text editor Atom. I would highly recommend Atom if you don't have Atom. It's open source and great. So here I'm just going to make some changes. So just some basic changes. Let's change that to MSA website. Now let's change that to MSA 2020 DevOps. I'm also going to get a new SVG, so I'm going to change the name of the logo here, and then just put the link for the MSA website in there. And we're going to just use this SVG from a free SVG providing website that I found. So we're going to download that and put it into the source folder and call it logo_2.svg, which is the name that we that we're referencing in the app.tsx file. And so we'd expect that to show up instead of the React logo. So I'm just going to do get status so we can see that I modified the app.tsx and the logo_2svg. I'm happy with that, so I'm just going to add that. And then we're going to commit that with a message, update website. And we're going to commit. We're going to push that commit up to the master branch, and now we'd expect that to kick off the build process, since we have our build pipeline set to listen to commits on the master branch. So we can see here that it has indeed kicked off the build process. It's currently running, and so if we have a look at that, everything's gone successful so far. It's finalizing the job. So we can see here that the job is running currently, and I'll just skip ahead on this part as well. So we can see that the job has successfully finished. And let's move over to the release pipeline. And we also see the release kicking off here. And we can see that the that we have the stage 1 task queued, and it's running now. So once the task has finished here, the deployment should go through. So we can see it succeeded, and let's refresh the page here. And as we can see, our changes have been deployed, and our continuous deployment, our pipeline is now continuously deploying our code. And that's a success. Okay, so great. That's the end of this tutorial. Just some closing remarks. In general, build pipelines and release pipelines are very useful. So, as you know, you can already deploy your code directly from your GitHub up to Azure using a more straightforward linking the two in a more straightforward fashion. But what's special about these pipelines is essentially sky's the limit, so you can do all sorts of things. And whole SRE teams are based upon Azure pipelines, so you can imagine how powerful that is. So if whatever organization you end up in, you'll be able to deploy their code using an Azure pipeline. because Azure pipelines can deploy all sorts of code. So it's not restricted to a certain language, and it's also not restricted to any sort of cloud platforms. On-prem is an option, cloud is an option. So just in general, it's a good tool to be aware of and know how to use. Okay, I'm going to pass it back to Paul, and he's going to walk you guys through what the requirements are for the this part of the assignment.
Thank you for that awesome presentation, Karam. I hope that gave you guys confidence to dive deeper into Azure DevOps and really explore the power of automation. So, feel free to get creative with your build and release pipeline. We are excited to see what you'll come up with. Don't forget to check out the latest assessment criteria for this module on GitHub. Otherwise, that's all from Karam and I. Good luck on your journey, and we'll see you next time.